Title: A Broken Hero. Chapter 1. The Broken Hero. Jack stood silently at the edge of the small town he had once protected with unwavering bravery. The people who once hailed him as their hero were oblivious to the guilt that weighed heavily on his shoulders. His gaze shifted towards the distance, lost in thoughts of the fateful night that shattered his reputation and, more importantly, the life of his closest friend's child. It had been a quiet evening, the serene calm that usually encircles the town serving as a stark contrast to the chaos that would soon be unleashed. Jack had driven through these streets countless times, feeling invincible in his role as the local protector. But that night, fate had intervened with dark intentions. As his car rounded a corner, he noticed a small figure crossing the road with reckless abandon. Panic struck him like a lightning bolt, causing him to swerve abruptly to avoid a collision. The sickening thud of impact and the sound of screeching tires echoed through the night. Jack knew what he had done, and in that moment, his heart quivered with both fear and dread. The child, Chloe, lay motionless on the cold asphalt, her innocent spirit shattered along with her fragile body. Jack rushed out of his car, his hands trembling as he kneeled beside her. Tears welled in his bloodshot eyes as he desperately called for help. The townspeople soon gathered around, their gasps and whispers haunting him like a remorseful chorus. In that moment, all Jack wanted to do was run. And that's exactly what Jack did. As Jack stumbled through the crowd, glancing at the sea of accusing eyes that now saw him not as a hero but as a destroyer, his heart gave way, as he could only feel the cold stares burning through him. His legs gave way beneath him, and he collapsed onto the unforgiving ground, consumed by guilt and regret. Days turned into weeks, but the weight of his inaction remained unrelenting. Jack isolated himself from the world, cutting ties with friends and family, unable to face their disappointment and reproach. His once towering spirit was now shattered, mirroring the broken glass scattered across the accident scene. As he began to reflect on his past, memories flickered through his mind like a slideshow of bitter regrets. He recalled the joyous celebrations that followed his countless triumphs, where gratitude and praise rained down upon him like confetti. But now, all that remained was the haunting silence of a fallen hero. Jack sought solace in the only place he believed could offer him redemption: the church. With heavy footsteps, he entered the worn wooden doors, hoping to find enlightenment and forgiveness amidst flickering candlelight and whispered prayers. He knelt before the altar, his head bowed and hands clasped tightly together. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the images of saints and the flickering glow of a lone candle illuminating the darkness. In this moment, the reality of his cowardice hit him like a ton of bricks. "Father," he whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. "I have failed. I let fear guide me, and now an innocent child is dead and her parents suffer because of my actions." The weight of his confession filled the room, and the silence seemed almost deafening. Jack longed for words of comfort and guidance, desperate for a spark of hope to rekindle his flickering spirit. As he continued to pray, the church door creaked open behind him. A figure emerged from the shadows, walking slowly towards him. Jack turned and found himself face to face with a kind-looking cleric whom he had known since high school. It was Brother Benjamin. "Hello, Jack." Brother Benjamin's voice was warm and compassionate, dispelling the darkness that had consumed Jack's heart. "I have been praying for you, brother. The path to redemption is not an easy one, but it is one we must all undertake." Tears streamed down Jack's face as he met Brother Benjamin's gaze. "Brother Benjamin, what should I do? How can I make amends for what I have done?" Brother Benjamin placed a gentle hand on Jack's trembling shoulder. "My dear friend and brother, first you must forgive yourself. Only then can you begin to heal the wounds you have inflicted. It is through remorse and self-reflection that we find the strength to make right what we have wronged. Jack lowered his head again, his mind swirling with the weight of his actions. The conversation with Brother Benjamin had opened a small crack of hope in his shattered heart. In the days and weeks that followed, he would embark on a journey of redemption, seeking not just forgiveness from others, but from himself. Little did he know that this journey would lead him down a path of self-discovery and spiritual awakening, where he would learn that even the broken can be mended and the fallen can rise again. Armed with newfound courage, Jack set forth on a mission to heal his broken soul and become the hero he once was, in the truest and purest sense of the word. But as the nightmares of little Chloe's face continued to haunt him, Jack's courage would soon evade him, leaving him feeling more hollow than before. Chapter 2, Lost in the Shadows. Jack woke up with a heavy heart, his room cloaked in darkness as if mirroring his inner turmoil. He couldn't bear to face the consequences of his actions, leaving behind the people who had once relied on him for support. The small town that had once provided him comfort now felt like a prison, suffocating him with its constant reminders of his past mistakes. With a deep sigh, Jack gathered his belongings, resisting the urge to call his girlfriend, Maya, and his best friend, Max. They deserved an explanation for his sudden departure, but facing them would only intensify his guilt. He justified his actions by convincing himself that leaving was for their own good, that they would be better off without his presence. As Jack stepped out into the unknown, he was met with a world that seemed both alien and harsh. The streets were filled with bustling crowds, their faces indifferent and detached. It was a stark contrast to the tight-knit community he had known all his life. Jack navigated through the crowd aimlessly, feeling like a lost soul in a sea of strangers. An elderly woman, her face etched with wrinkles and wisdom, caught Jack's eye. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, and she was known for her knack for reading people's emotions. Intrigued, Jack approached her, hoping for some guidance in this murky chapter of his life. "Excuse me, Mrs. Thompson." Jack began tentatively, his voice betraying his inner turmoil. "I'm lost, and I don't know where to go from here." Mrs. Thompson studied Jack with kind, understanding eyes. "Young man, finding your way in life starts with finding yourself. Confront your past mistakes, seek forgiveness, and learn to forgive yourself. Only then will you begin to find solace in your new reality." Jack nodded, his mind swirling with thoughts and emotions. Her words resonated with him, providing a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness that surrounded him. Encounters with other characters further challenged Jack's perceptions and encouraged him to confront his inner demons. There was Everett, a homeless man who had once been a successful businessman. Through long conversations over hot cups of coffee, Jack learned about the importance of humility and the fragility of material success. Everett's story served as a stark reminder for Jack, urging him not to repeat the mistakes that had led him down his own destructive path. Additionally, Jack met Mia, a young artist who had also left her hometown in search of inspiration. As they discussed their shared struggles, Jack discovered that he was not alone in his quest for redemption. Mia's unwavering belief in the power of self-expression and art ignited a spark within Jack, leading him to question his own passions and purpose in life. With each encounter, Jack found himself slowly shedding the weight of his guilt. The journey toward self-forgiveness was far from easy, but he realized that he couldn't hide from his mistakes forever. In order to move forward, he needed to confront his past head-on and reconcile with the people he had left behind. As Jack continued on his journey, unsure of what lay ahead, he clung to the newfound wisdom he had gained from the characters he had met. Their stories had become an integral part of his own, shaping his understanding of the world and his place in it. With an open heart and a determination to face his demons, Jack forged ahead, ready to rewrite his story and find his way out of the shadows. Chapter 3: The Path of Redemption. Jack found himself driving down a familiar road, the well-worn path leading back to the small town he had left behind years ago. The trees stood tall and proud, their branches seeming to welcome him back. As he approached the outskirts of town, memories flooded his mind, each one a reminder of the mistakes he had made. He parked his car in front of a small cafe, the same one where he used to meet his girlfriend, Maya. Jack jogged his memory, recalling the countless conversations they had shared over cups of coffee and plates of warm pastries. He needed to find Maya, to face her, and ask for her forgiveness. As he entered the cafe, the familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee enveloped him. Jack scanned the room anxiously, his heart racing as he searched for Maya's familiar face. And then, he caught a glimpse of her sitting by the window, her eyes fixed on a book but distant, lost in her thoughts. Jack approached the table hesitantly, his voice trembling as he spoke her name. "Maya?" Startled, Maya looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. She took a moment to take in Jack's appearance, his weathered face and haunted eyes. "Jack? Is it really you?" Maya whispered, disbelief evident in her voice. Jack nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "It's me, Maya. I've come back to make things right, to ask for your forgiveness." Maya's expression softened, and she gestured for Jack to sit. They both sank into the chairs, the weight of their past hanging heavily in the air. "You left Jack," Maya began, her voice laced with a mixture of hurt and anger. "You left without a word, without any explanation. And then we heard what had happened." Jack couldn't bear to meet her gaze, feeling the weight of his guilt like an anchor dragging him down. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I was lost, consumed by my own mistakes. I didn't know how to face you, or anyone else." "Is that why you came back?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To seek forgiveness?" Jack nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I want to make things right, Maya. I want you to know how truly sorry I am. I want a chance to somehow make amends." Maya's eyes softened, a glimmer of understanding shining through. "Jack, it's not for me to forgive you entirely. We were both victims that day, but the true victim was Max and Emily, Chloe's parents. You not only caused the death of their child, but you just left her, with strangers in the middle of the street. Jack, you were her godfather. Have you even sought their forgiveness?" Jack's heart sank, as he realized he hadn't even considered the full impact his actions had on Max and Emily. "No, I haven't. I didn't know where to start. I still don't." A knowing smile played on Maya's lips. "Go find them, Jack. Face them, just as you are facing me. They deserve the chance to hear your apology and decide if they can forgive you." With Maya's words ringing in his ears, Jack left the cafe, renewed determination coursing through his veins. He had a long way to go, but he knew that seeking redemption meant not only asking for forgiveness, but also making amends. As he walked the streets of the town he once called home, Jack embarked on a quest to find Max and Emily. The road to redemption would be arduous, but he was ready to face his demons, to confront the reality of his actions, and to make things right. Little did Jack know that the encounter with both Max and Emily, sweet little Chloe's parents, would test the limits of his courage and selflessness, pushing him to confront the darkest corners of his past. But he was determined to make amends, to grasp redemption's hand and let it guide him towards a brighter future. Chapter 4: Confronting the shadows. Returning to his small town, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of unease settle in his stomach. As he parked his car and stepped out looking around, he couldn't escape the feeling that he was walking into a battlefield, ready to confront the ghosts of his past. He had left his long-term girlfriend, Maya, and his best friend, Max, without a word. No explanation or goodbye. Just an empty void where he once stood. And now, he had to face the consequences of his actions. Jack took a deep breath and made his way to the place he used to call home and back to the old neighborhood he grew up in. The old house of his childhood best friend Max and Emily, where little Chloe took her first steps and rode her first bike, somehow seemed smaller, and with the faded paint on the porch giving it a tired and worn-out appearance, this once vibrant and alive house now seemed unfamiliar and vacant. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. Emily was the first to open the door, her eyes red and swollen from endless nights and months of crying. She took one look at Jack, and her anger erupted like a volcano. "Where the hell have you been, Jack?" she shouted, her voice cracking with both anger and pain. Jack stood there, unable to find the words to express his regret. He watched as tears streamed down Emily's face, his heart breaking with each one. "I'm so sorry, Emily," he managed to choke out, his voice barely a whisper. "I never meant to hurt you, or..." Jack's voice faded away, not being able to mention Chloe's name. Emily's anger softened for a moment as she took in Jack's sincerity. "Do you have any idea what you put us through?" she asked, her voice laced with vulnerability. "We were left wondering if you were dead or alive after the night of the accident, or if we meant anything to you at all." Jack couldn't meet her eyes. He knew he had hurt them both deeply, and the weight of his actions pressed heavily on his shoulders. "I thought leaving was the only way to protect you," he admitted, his voice filled with shame. "I thought I was doing what was best." Max, who had been silently standing behind Emily, finally spoke up. His anger burned in his eyes, yet there was also a flicker of hurt, of betrayal. "You don't get to decide what's best for us, Jack," he said, his voice rough and strained. "You abandoned us without a word, without any regard for our feelings. And you didn't even show up to our daughter's funeral." Jack nodded, finally meeting Max's gaze. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with remorse. "I was selfish, and I'm so sorry for that. I never wanted to hurt either of you, but I thought I had no other choice." The trio stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity. The weight of their broken relationship hung heavily in the air, suffocating them all. But within that silence, there was also a glimmer of hope. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right," Jack finally said, his voice filled with determination. "I don't expect your forgiveness right away, but I want the chance to earn it back." Emily and Max exchanged a hesitant look before nodding in unison. "We'll need time," Emily said softly, her voice laced with both pain and forgiveness. "But perhaps you can start by telling us everything, Jack. All the reasons why you left, why you thought it was the only way." And so, Jack began the painful process of unraveling the tangled mess of emotions that led him to leave. He laid bare his fears and insecurities, the darkness that haunted him and clouded his judgment. And as he shared his story, Emily and Max listened, their anger slowly turning into understanding. Confronting the shadows of his past wasn't easy, but Jack knew it was necessary. It was the first step in rebuilding the broken bonds that once made him whole. And as they sat there, talking and listening, Jack hoped that the wounds of the past would someday heal, and the three of them could find their way back to each other once again. Chapter 5. In the eyes of the law, Jack sat in the cold wooden bench of the courtroom, feeling a heavy pit in his stomach. This was the moment he had been dreading, the day when he would face the legal consequences of his reckless actions. His mind was flooded with thoughts of what might come next. He tried to shake them off, but the fear remained. As the trial began, Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the eyes in the room. The judge, an imposing figure in his black robe, stared down at him with an expression of stern disapproval. Jack shifted uncomfortably under the judge's gaze, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing moment. The prosecution wasted no time in presenting their case. The facts were laid out, one by one, like a series of damning revelations. Jack listened intently to each word, his heart sinking lower with each incriminating detail. It was impossible to deny the truth. He had fled the scene of the accident, leaving an innocent victim behind. As witness after witness took the stand, Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of their words. Their testimony painted a picture of a man consumed by fear and guilt, a man who had let his past mistakes guide his actions. Jack could see the pain in the eyes of the people he had unintentionally harmed, and it tore at his soul. The defense had its turn to present their case, but the arguments felt weak and frail against the overwhelming evidence before them, and Jack's lawyer seemed to struggle to find footing in the face of such undeniable facts. Jack could hear the disappointment in his lawyer's voice, a voice that pleaded for mercy in a sea of judgment. Finally, it was Jack's turn to speak. He rose from his seat, his legs trembling beneath him. He looked around the room, his eyes searching desperately for a glimmer of understanding. But all he found were hardened faces and pursed lips, and the embodiment of justice seeking retribution. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Jack began softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "I have spent every waking moment since that terrible night filled with regret and remorse. I can't undo what I've done, but I will do everything in my power to make amends." As Jack's words echoed through the courtroom, he could feel a collective skepticism in the air. It was as if the courtroom itself held its breath, waiting for a single shred of evidence that would prove his remorse genuine. But no such evidence could be found, no matter how desperately Jack wished it to be true. The judge, a stoic figure presiding over the proceedings, finally broke the silence. His voice was stern, devoid of any hint of leniency. "Mr. Jackson Reynolds, your actions that night were reckless and inexcusable. Though it was an accident, you have shown a complete disregard for the lives of others. I cannot, in good conscience, let you go unpunished." Jack's heart dropped as he heard the judgment passed against him. He knew that he deserved the punishment, but the reality of it all hit him like a ton of bricks. He felt a lump forming in his throat, threatening to swallow him whole. As Jack was led away, handcuffed and defeated, he couldn't help but think about the consequences of his actions. It wasn't just his own life that would be forever changed, but the lives of those he had unintentionally harmed as well. And then there was Chloe, sweet little Chloe, who never would see the sun shining again, ride her bike or grow up and get married and start a family of her own. Yes, the road to redemption seemed longer and more treacherous than ever before. But Jack was determined to face the consequences of his actions head-on. He would use this experience as a catalyst for change, a means to understand the true impact of his choices. As he walked out of the courtroom and into an uncertain future, Jack vowed to make amends, not just in the eyes of the law, but in the eyes of those he had hurt. Chapter 6: A Journey Towards Forgiveness. Jack stood at a crossroads, both figuratively and literally. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow on the path ahead. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when he would finally fully confront his past and find peace and forgiveness. As he took his first step back into his hometown church, a familiar voice whispered in his ear. "Jack, my friend, it's time to let go." It was Brother Benjamin, his wise old friend from high school, who had been a guiding light throughout Jack's journey. His presence was a constant reminder that forgiveness was within reach, if only Jack would embrace it. The path before him led him to the humble cottage of his childhood friend, Sarah. She had been a steadfast presence in Jack's life, always believing in his potential for redemption. As he approached the door, his heart pounded in his chest, unsure of how she would receive him. Sarah opened the door with a warm smile, her eyes reflecting a mix of joy and sadness. "Jack," she whispered, her voice filled with forgiveness. "I've been waiting for you." Tears welled up in Jack's eyes as he stepped inside, feeling the weight of his past lifting off his shoulders. He apologized for the pain he had personally caused her and asked for her forgiveness. Without hesitation, Sarah embraced him, her forgiveness washing over him like a healing balm. Over the following weeks, Jack embarked on a journey of reconciliation, seeking forgiveness from those he had wronged. Each conversation was filled with raw emotion and vulnerability, but with each act of forgiveness, Jack felt a burden lifted. One evening, Jack found himself standing before the grave of little Chloe. For years, he had carried the guilt of his past mistakes, blaming himself for the pain he had caused her and for taking her little life. But now, as he laid a bouquet of flowers on her grave, he realized that forgiveness was not just about seeking it from others, it was about forgiving himself. "Sweet Chloe," he whispered, his voice quivering with emotion. "I'm sorry for the pain I caused you and for running away as I did. I hope you can find it in the heart of your spirit to forgive me." As he spoke, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby trees, as if young Chloe's spirit was reaching out to him. In that moment, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that forgiveness was not something to be earned or achieved, it was something to be embraced. With a newfound sense of purpose, Jack returned to his small community, determined to make amends and rebuild the trust he had shattered. One by one, he confronted his past victims, acknowledging the pain he had caused and asking for their forgiveness. Some accepted him with open arms, while others were hesitant, but Jack understood that forgiveness was a journey, and he would need to prove himself through his actions. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, Jack dedicated himself to the service of others. He volunteered at local charities, helping those in need, and founded a support group for individuals who had experienced trauma after losing a child. Through these acts of kindness, he not only found solace and redemption but also inspired others to seek forgiveness in their own lives. One evening, as Jack walked along the familiar path where his journey had begun, he reflected on the power of forgiveness. It was not a magical potion that erased the past or changed the choices he had made. Instead, forgiveness was a transformative process, a journey towards peace and acceptance within oneself. Jack smiled to himself, knowing that he had embarked on that journey and had come out on the other side. He had learned the true meaning of redemption, that forgiveness was not just about seeking it from others, but also about forgiving oneself. As he continued down the path, hope filled his heart, and he whispered a silent prayer of gratitude to all those who had supported him along the way. He knew that his journey was far from over, but with forgiveness as his guide, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The end.